The government's pathetic response to the cost of living crisis has been called out by a top economist. This is Miata van Bula, director of the New Economics Foundation, laying into Suella Braverman.
When you top up all the measures that the government has put in place, families on average are still £1,100 worse off. So your numbers are literally made up. They're literally made up. And, you know, the analysis that we've done at the New Economics Foundation suggests that this year, 1 in 3 households and half of all our children are going to struggle to afford bread and butter things, are going to have to make day-to-day sacrifices just to stay afloat. And it doesn't feel like the government has grasped the scale of the challenge. Because if you had, you would have acted by now. And you talk about the lowest families. The Chancellor took £1,000 from those families last year. And then in the spring statement that we just had, there was literally not a single measure that would support families on the lowest incomes in this country. And there are things that you could do to act. And you're choosing not to, but there are things that you could do. So that windfall tax is a legitimate thing that you could do. Use that to bear down on bills for the next year to 18 months, whilst we have a Great Homes Upgrade, a national programme of home insulation, so we can insulate millions of homes over the next 3 years. And then you combine that with a £15 billion package to boost to benefits, so that families that are at the sharp end of this crisis, that the Chancellor has left to languish, where people are moving well beyond the choice of heating your home or feeding your kid. They're not doing either. And for me, when we have families on the brink, when we have children going into destitution, when 2 million people in the richest country in the world are skipping meals because they can't afford it, the fact you're not acting, I think, is unforgivable.
That was so well explained. As a result of Tory policies, households are, on average, £1,100 worse off this year. In the spring statement, there were no measures for the poorest families. And what we need to do is to tax energy giants to pay to uprate people's benefits so they don't go hungry. It's what a compassionate government would do, and it makes perfect economic sense. Rishi Sunak isn't budging, though, and speaking to Bloomberg, he gave a new reason why benefits can't increase to match inflation this year.
The technical problems, it sounds like an excuse, but the operation of our welfare system is actually technically complicated, and it's not necessarily possible to do that for everybody. And actually, many of the systems are built in a way that can only be done once a year, and the decision was taken quite a while ago. Before,
but you managed to put the furlough. You designed the furlough scheme for most of the
yes,
UK popular working force for a few weeks.
But the welfare system works in a very different way, and we're constrained somewhat by the operation of the welfare system, so it can't be done for everybody in that way.
That's right. According to Rishi, millions of families will have to go without enough food or heating this year because a computer in the Treasury said no. We talk a lot on this show about ridiculous excuses as to why the government can't do the simple thing and help people, but computer says no. That's kind of a new one, isn't it?
Yeah, and also you have to remember, Michael, this is the Chancellor who was overseeing furlough, right? I don't think that at the beginning of 2020, the Tories were thinking, oh, you know what, we're going to have the biggest program of out-of-work benefits the country's ever seen. You know, at one point, I think the state in this country was paying the wages of a quarter of the labour market or something just extraordinary. You know, millions of people were getting these payments from the government not to work. If you had a computer says no mentality then, I mean, things wouldn't have worked out as you probably might have hoped. I think we would have had massive unrest, which is why they did it. And I suppose the calculation now is that what we're going to see this year won't lead to major political consequences. I think that's wrong, by the way, Michael. Important to say, you know, if we are going to see inflation of 10% this year, which is what the Bank of England predicted at the end of last week, the Centre for Economics and Business Research predicted 6 weeks ago, inflation of 10%, we've not seen anything like that since the late 1970s. Now, people love to complain about the 70s and say inflation was high, wage increases were higher. I don't know why they hate that, but there we are. Now we're seeing high inflation, but wage increases not as high. So big problem there. You see a real fall in living standards. Now, the OBR, on the day of the budget in late March, the OBR predicted that the average person would lose about £500 in spending power. So the average person watching this, well, you're not probably representative necessarily of Britain. The average person in the UK, working age, will be £550, I think, worse off as a result of inflation rising, which is to say the price of things going up more quickly than your wage increases. Now, that looks, I think, optimistic. The Centre for Economics and Business Research said it was optimistic at the time. They predicted £1,000, not 500. And I think from what the Bank of England is saying, they're tending towards the worst case scenario here. So the average person will be £1,000 worse off this year as a result of inflation. That's before interest rate rises. Of course, if you're on a variable rate mortgage, which is millions of people, you will see your mortgage also go up over the course of the year by more than £1,000, thousands of pounds potentially. Rishi Sunak privately said that interest rates will go to 2.5%. I thought that'd be a bigger story. It's not. Now, that is not high by historical standards. Before the global financial crisis, they were 5%. But even at 1%, that's the highest they've been, I believe, in 13 years. So for it to go to 2.5%, when you've got rising inflation, when you're going to have rising unemployment, is a major, major problem. And I think what his response to that question shows is that we're in a situation now, probably for the first time in about 40 years, where politicians are being confronted with low growth, high inflation, and potentially rising interest rates, all three at once. And they don't really know what to do about it. And of course, increasing interest rates is designed to deal with inflation. The problem is that we're importing our inflation. I don't see what it's going to do, because we've got higher inflation because of supply side changes, higher energy costs, higher food costs, higher raw materials because of COVID, rising demand across the world, and then of course the war in Ukraine. So it is a unique set of circumstances which actually no politician anywhere on earth who is in politics, that includes Joe Biden, who's in his late 70s, no serving politician at an elite level was around the last time we had a set of circumstances like this. So I think they lack the intellectual and policy toolkit to really be aware of how to respond. And I think Sunak's response there, his doing down the question in a sense, his diminishing it, I think illustrates that.
The answer is offensive in so many ways. I mean, obviously, it's just bullshit. The reason that benefits are only rising by 3% when inflation is 10% is because Rishi Sunak is ideologically committed to making poor people pay for this crisis and protecting the incomes of the wealthy. That's the real reason. But even if you take him at his word, even if the computer systems are, designed in such a way that it's very difficult to increase benefits more than once in a year, given runaway inflation, even if you take him at his word, how difficult does he think it is to live on the breadline and then have food prices rise by 10% when your income's only rising by 3%, right? If what we're talking about is this being a bit difficult, his solution is that, it'd be too difficult to rise them this year, maybe we'll do it next year. People have to live through a year and a winter before that, right? And I think it's going to be a little bit easier for the Treasury to sort out their computer system than it is for millions of people to magic money out of thin air so that they don't have to choose between heating their homes or eating, or as Miata Fanbula in that clip said, doing neither. Because if you have no money, that is a problem that cannot be solved. A computer system making it a little bit difficult to uprate benefits twice a year, that is a problem which can be solved. As I say, obviously what's going on here is ideological, but that excuse, it just adds insult to injury for me.